want to know what makes autism and language disorders in the brain larger? What does increased brain size have to do with sensitive and overwhelmable brain? I already said similar sensory problems from different sensory problems from similar brain tissue. Are anxiety, stress, and sleep problems related to sensory, social, and learning problems? It's amazing how few people ask that. How may immune, gastrointestinal, and metabolic problems relate to a sensory, oversensitive, and overwhelmable brain? And that's directly related to what people are here today for. And could treatment of underlying biological problems help language, behavior, and social problems? And that's what my treatment study is going to be about, and that's so we can measure when you guys do this work to track what happens, and if you see improvement in your child, can we show it in the brain? That would really have a lot of impact. We just have launched in the last 2 months a study. I am really excited about this study. It was funded by the Department of Defense, which is not a military study, they just have some medical funding. In the first request for grant applications which actually honored this biological model. And I was funded to look at babies who are at high risk for autism because the older sibling has a diagnosis of autism. So we're inviting pregnant mothers or babies up to the age of 16 weeks to come in and be characterized, cord blood if we can, assessments at 2 weeks, 4, 9, 14, 20, and 30, and we're going to probably add 8 weeks. And we're like throwing the book at these kids. So EEG, we have a way of slipping on a net that takes 2 minutes. It's very comfortable. So it's not all this rubbing and stuff that the kids don't like. To look at sensory processing and how the brain communicates. We're doing bloods, the metabolism, the glutathione, the lipids, the immune blood. Stress measures, something you can wear to track your stress system, and neuro and motor and cognitive exams. And we're going to try to get a machine that will measure brain perfusion at the bedside, just with little light stimuli. Our hypothesis is that the biological problems will precede the behavioral problems. That the biological problems will develop. You're not necessarily born with a total mess up of the biology. That emerges over the first 2 years. That's I had a grant I put into a genetics-oriented foundation. Somebody actually said, why would you want to measure these things more than once? As if the genes completely determine them. They don't. And things develop. And can measures of immune and metabolic functions predict risk? And in the future, can this guide us in simple preventive things that we can do to help children be more resilient so they don't develop either autism at all or as severe as autism. I am very committed both to doing the science and to changing the system. We need, in order to change the system, to demonstrate key findings so that treatment, like what you guys are here to talk about, seems possible and necessary. And in order to do that, you have to show that the body affects the brain, and the environment affects both body and brain. And I think we need parent-driven research and not just researcher-driven research to do that, which is what the database is about. And we need prevention. And we need individualized treatment because no two people need the exact same thing in the exact same order in the exact same way. And this is an article that I wrote in Alternative Therapy in Medicine and Health, Learning from Autism Catastrophe, the Key Leverage Points. And I said autism is not a tragedy, it's a catastrophe. And a lot of what I've told you is summarized in there. And this is the database, which I'll just skip right now because you'll hear more about that. We organized a series of continuing medical education courses. This is one, Clinical Implications of Environmental Toxicology in Children's Neurodevelopment and Autism. And I'm going to read you the summary, and I think I'm almost done. Concerning increases in autism as well as allergies, asthma, learning disabilities, and other pediatric conditions all suggest a contributory role for environmental factors. Understanding mechanisms of environmental toxicology, and I would say immunology and other things as well, has the potential to improve how we treat affected individuals. Research findings support consideration of immune abnormalities, gene-environment interactions, and enhanced vulnerability to toxins and infection in autism. Autism can be reframed as a medical condition with features that affect the whole body, including the brain. Low-dose, chronic, and combined exposures of various kinds, toxic, infectious, and other, can have food, lousy food, can have significant impact on neurodevelopment and children's health, and environmental exposures exact enormous preventable economic, social, and human impact. So, in terms of the planet, we all live downstream. There is no getting away from it. And this picture here shows how our brilliant brain created all this junky pollution, and that pollution is coming and pushing our self-destruct button. And we've got to break that loop. From the perspective that I'm talking about, autism is not a unique genetic brain disorder, but the tip of the iceberg of a lot more that's going on more broadly. And the canary in the coal mine, that these are vulnerable children telling us that we have to change what we're doing more broadly, or it's going to affect a lot more than the people being affected now. This is Wendell Berry wrote an article in Harper's Magazine about how we have to change the way we live. And he said, our national faith so far has always been there's always more. Our true religion is a sort of autistic industrialism. And I thought that, and then he has this picture of these cars piled up in a junkyard. They're all these crushed cars. And I was thinking to myself, you know, we typical people are so proud of ourselves that we can look at these autistic people and say, oh, look at the autistic people. They're impaired because they line up cars. So what are we doing in the whole culture? We're lining up junk. And I think we have to actually look at ourselves as engaged in repetitive and restricted and destructive behaviors. And that this is what, we have to take that into account as that's feeding into our kids' brain. So, years ago, Kurt Vonnegut wrote, and he was a science fiction writer who wrote Fahrenheit 451, and he had an article, I remember, from 10, 15 years ago, and he said, America's greatest contribution to world civilization is Alcoholics Anonymous. And why the 12-step program? And I think that, I really like that. And the first step of the 12-step program is to look into the problem. And I think that we really need to do that right now in the planet, as well as in the autism rates, as well as in a lot of things.